The air hung thick with desperation, a miasma of stale cigarettes and cheap beer that clung to the exposed pipes running along the ceiling. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting sickly yellow shadows across faces I didn't want to recognize. Each inhale filled my lungs with the metallic tang of blood money and broken dreams. I huddled in the corner, my thin cotton dress offering no protection against the basement's damp chill. My fingers trembled as they clutched at the frayed hem, nails bitten to the quick. The concrete floor beneath my bare feet radiated cold that traveled up my legs and settled in my bones, a familiar companion to the hunger gnawing at my stomach. "Stand up straight, Elara. Nobody wants damaged goods." My mother's voice sliced through the din, sharp as the needles she'd plunge into her arms later tonight. I could smell the withdrawal on her, sour sweat and chemical need. I raised my eyes just enough to see them, Stan and Brenda Vance, the genetic lottery I'd lost at birth. Stan's leather jacket hung loose on his frame, once muscular arms now wiry and twitching. Brenda's makeup was applied with a shaky hand, dark lipstick bleeding into the fine lines around her mouth. They hadn't always been this way. Memories of birthday cakes and bedtime stories still haunted me, phantoms of a life before the pills, before the powder. "I changed my mind," I whispered, the words barely audible even to myself. Stan's fingers dug into my shoulder, his nails leaving crescent moons in my skin. "This ain't a democracy, princess. We're underwater with Vico. The butcher don't take IOUs. The crowd shifted, and I caught sight of Vico across the room, a mountain of a man with hands that looked like they could crush windpipes as easily as they now crushed the beer can in his grip. His eyes met mine, and I quickly looked away, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Besides," Brenda added, her voice a raspy imitation of maternal concern, "you'll fetch a good price. Pretty girl like you." Her fingers brushed my cheek, and I flinched away from the touch, from the smell of nicotine that seemed embedded in her skin. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the crackling speakers, announcing the next lot. A girl, maybe 17, was dragged to the makeshift stage, really just a raised platform of wooden pallets. Her eyes were vacant, already gone to whatever mental sanctuary she'd constructed. I envied her that escape. 500, someone called out. 750, countered another. The bidding continued, each number a nail in her coffin. When it ended, 2 men in suits led her away. She didn't resist. "See," Stan nudged me. Quick and painless. Better than what Vico had planned for us. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "You promised. After tonight the debt is cleared. You leave me alone." Brenda's laugh was a harsh, broken thing. "Sure, baby. Whatever helps you sleep." The smell of expensive cologne cut through the sour air. Someone new had entered. I didn't dare look up, but I felt the room's energy shift, like prey animals sensing a predator. "Next up," the auctioneer called, his voice suddenly more animated. "Special merchandise. Rare blood type. Untapped potential. Starting bid at 100. Stan's grip tightened, propelling me forward. My legs moved mechanically, each step bringing me closer to the stage. The lights felt hotter now, burning through my skin, exposing every vulnerability. I stood on the platform, eyes fixed on my dirty feet. The floorboards were sticky with spilled drinks, and God knows what else. Someone in the crowd whistled, and laughter rippled through the room. "Come on, sweetheart, give us a twirl," the auctioneer said, his breath hot against my ear. When I didn't move, he grabbed my arm, spinning me roughly. The room tilted and swam before my eyes. Faces blurred together, hungry, calculating, indifferent. I caught a glimpse of my parents, Stan already counting imaginary money, Brenda's attention diverted to a man offering her a pill. 100, someone called. 150, another voice countered. The numbers climbed slowly. 200, 250, 300. Each bid a price tag on my existence. 500, called a man, with yellowed teeth and a neck tattoo. The auctioneer looked around expectantly. 500, going once. I searched the crowd desperately, looking for something, anything, that might save me. My gaze landed on a figure standing in the shadows near the back. Tall, impossibly still, watching with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the gloom. 500, going twice. 10 cents. The voice cut through the room like a blade, deep, refined, completely out of place in this den of desperation. A murmur rippled through the crowd as they parted, revealing the source. He stepped into the light, and my breath caught. Midnight suit tailored to perfection, skin pale as moonlight, hair black as sin, but it was his eyes that held me, cold, ancient, the color of Arctic ice. The auctioneer sputtered. "Sir, the bid is at 500, I said. The man repeated, each word precise as a surgeon's cut. 10 cents. He flicked something small and copper through the air. Stan lunged forward, catching the coin before it hit the ground. He examined it, confusion twisting his features. "The hell is this supposed to be?" The stranger's lips curved into something too sharp to be a smile. "Exactly what your daughter is worth to you. A dirty dime." The room fell silent. Even the dripping pipes seemed to hold their breath. Stan's face flushed red. "Now listen here." "No," the stranger interrupted. "You listen." He pulled out a phone, tapped the screen once. "I've just transferred 10 billion fangs to this establishment's account." Gasps echoed through the room. 10 billion fangs, cryptocurrency of the elite, worth more than most countries' GDP. For a 10-cent bid. The auctioneer whispered, his tablet pinging with the transfer notification. "The coin is for them," the stranger said, nodding toward my parents. "They've demonstrated what she's worth to them. The billions are what she's worth to me." My knees threatened to buckle. 10 billion. The number was incomprehensible, meaningless in its enormity. Stan stared at the dime in his palm, then at the stranger, greed warring with confusion on his face. "Deal," he finally said, closing his fingers around the coin with a smile that turned my stomach. The stranger, no, the buyer, approached the stage. Each step was measured, predatory. He stood before me now, close enough that I could smell him, not cologne as I'd thought, but something elemental, like ozone before a storm, like metal and money and power. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice for me alone. I shook my head, unable to form words. "My name is Dorian Thorne." The name hit me like a physical blow. Dorian Thorne, the Vampire King, CEO of Thorne Industries, the man who controlled half the world's wealth and all of its shadows. He reached out, one cold finger tilting my chin up until I had no choice but to meet his gaze. Something ancient and hungry lurked behind those eyes, something that recognized the rarest blood type on earth flowing through my veins. "Golden blood," he murmured. 1 in 8 million. "I've waited a very long time for you." The room seemed to recede, narrowing to just his face, his voice, the impossible gravity of his presence. Dorian turned to address the stunned crowd, his hand still holding my chin. The single word he spoke resonated through the room, through my bones, sealing my fate with terrifying finality. "Mine," the digital transfer notification pinged, echoing in the sudden silence. $10 billion. The number flashed on the auctioneer's tablet, its blue glow illuminating his slack-jawed face in the dimness. 10 billion, more money than I could comprehend, more than I'd ever see in 100 lifetimes of scrubbing floors and selling plasma, and I'd just been purchased with it. The crowd erupted into chaos, gasps, shouts, the scrape of chairs as people stood for a better look. I felt their stares like physical things crawling over my skin. The auctioneer's gavel fell once, twice, 3 times, the sound barely penetrating the roaring in my ears. "This auction is concluded," he announced, voice trembling. "Mr. Thorne, if you'll follow me to complete the transaction." But Dorian Thorne didn't move. His hand remained on my chin, thumb brushing my lower lip in a gesture so intimate I shivered despite the heat. "The transaction is complete," he said, never taking his eyes from mine. "The funds have been transferred." I glanced toward my parents. Stan was frantically checking his phone, his face contorting as he scrolled through what I assumed was his banking app. Brenda stood beside him, her cigarette forgotten between her fingers, ash dropping to the floor. "Where's the money?" Stan's voice cracked as he addressed the auctioneer. "You said it would be instant." The auctioneer cleared his throat. "The payment has been processed according to the terms you agreed to, Mr. Vance. 10% now, the remainder in scheduled installments over." 10%. Stan's face flushed crimson. "That's not what we agreed to." I felt Dorian's chest rumble with quiet laughter. "Actually, it is precisely what you agreed to. Perhaps you should have read the contract more carefully." He turned to me, his voice softening. "Come, Elara, your new life begins now." My name in his mouth sounded different somehow, like it belonged to someone else, someone worthy of $10 billion. I hadn't even realized he knew it. Stan lunged forward, but 2 men in dark suits materialized from the shadows, blocking his path. I recognized them now as Dorian's security, the ones who had been positioned at the entrance when I'd been dragged in. "This isn't over," Stan shouted, spittle flying from his lips. "She's my daughter." "Mine." "Not anymore," Dorian replied, his tone conversational but edged with steel. He placed his hand at the small of my back, guiding me toward the exit. The touch sent electricity up my spine, and I moved as if in a dream, my bare feet silent on the sticky floor. The cool night air hit me like a slap when we emerged from the warehouse. I hadn't been outside in days, not since Stan had locked me in that room to prepare me for the auction. The stars above seemed impossibly bright, mocking in their beauty. A sleek black car idled at the curb, its engine a low purr that vibrated through the concrete. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. Up close, I could see it wasn't just any car but a Rolls-Royce, its interior glowing amber like the inside of a jewel box. "After you," Dorian said, his hand still at my back, warm through the thin fabric of the dress they'd forced me into. I hesitated, suddenly aware of how filthy I was, unwashed hair, the smudges of dirt on my skin, the lingering stench of fear, and that warehouse clinging to me. This car probably cost more than the entire neighborhood I'd grown up in. "I'll ruin the seats," I whispered, the first words I'd spoken to him. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. "I assure you, the car has seen worse." I doubted that, but I slid inside anyway, the leather cool and buttery against my bare legs. Dorian followed, settling beside me with fluid grace. The door closed with a soft thunk, sealing us in together. "Where are we going?" I asked as the car pulled away from the curb. Through the tinted windows, I could see Stan and Brenda emerging from the warehouse, Stan gesticulating wildly while Brenda hung back, already lighting another cigarette. "Home," Dorian replied simply. He pressed a button, and a panel slid open to reveal a small refrigerator. "Water? You must be dehydrated." I accepted the crystal bottle he offered, twisting off the cap with shaking hands. The water was cold and clean, nothing like the metallic-tasting tap water I was used to. I drank greedily, suddenly aware of how parched I was. "You have questions," he said, after I'd drained half the bottle. It wasn't a question. I had 1,000 questions, but they all tangled in my throat. Why me? What did he want? What did golden blood mean? Instead, what came out was, $10 billion is a lot of money for a blood donor. His lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is that what you think you are? A blood donor?" The car glided through the dark streets of the city, moving from the industrial wasteland of the warehouse district toward the gleaming towers of downtown. I watched the scenery change through the window, the transformation from poverty to wealth, as stark as the line between night and day. "What else would I be?" I finally asked. "A miracle," he said simply. "Do you know how rare your blood type is, Elara? Rutnull. The golden blood. Fewer than 50 people in the world have it." I'd known my blood was rare. It had come up during a hospital stay when I was 12, after Stan had pushed me down the stairs during one of his rages. The doctors had made a fuss, mentioned something about universal donors and research, but Stan had hustled me out as soon as I could walk, worried about the bill. "So you paid $10 billion for transfusions." The idea seemed absurd, even as I said it. Dorian laughed, the sound rich and dark like expensive chocolate. "No, little one. I paid $10 billion for you." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my neck where my pulse thrummed. "Your blood is merely the beginning of your value." The car slowed, turning into an underground garage beneath the tallest building in the city, Thorne Tower, a spire of glass and steel that pierced the skyline like a silver needle. I'd seen it 1,000 times from a distance, but never imagined I'd set foot inside. "Welcome to your new home," Dorian said, as the car stopped. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out onto polished concrete, my bare feet leaving smudges that seemed like sacrilege. We entered a private elevator, its interior mirrored and gold-trimmed. Dorian pressed his palm to a scanner, and the doors closed silently. There were no buttons, no floor numbers. The elevator simply began to rise, so smoothly I barely felt the movement. "The penthouse occupies the top 3 floors," Dorian explained, watching my reflection in the mirrored wall. "You'll have the entire middle floor to yourself." My own floor, in a penthouse. The concept was so foreign I couldn't process it. My entire life had been spent in cramped apartments and shabby rentals, sharing rooms with whatever addict Stan and Brenda had invited to crash for the week. The elevator doors opened directly into a foyer larger than our entire apartment. The floors were white marble veined with gold, the walls a soft cream that seemed to glow from within. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, casting prismatic rainbows across the space. "Mira will help you get settled," Dorian said, gesturing to a woman who appeared from a side hallway. She was petite and elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a neat bun. "She manages the household and will see to your needs." Mira bowed slightly. "Miss Vance, we've been expecting you. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters." I glanced at Dorian, suddenly reluctant to leave the only familiar presence in this alien environment. He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes, softening the predatory edge I'd seen earlier. "Rest, bathe, Change into something comfortable. We'll talk over dinner. He checked his watch, an understated piece that probably cost more than a house. Shall we say 2 hours? It wasn't really a question. I nodded, and he turned away, already pulling out his phone, transforming before my eyes from mysterious vampire king to corporate CEO. I followed Mira down a hallway lined with artwork, original pieces. I realized with a shock, not the cheap prints Stan sometimes stole from hotel rooms. She opened a set of double doors and stepped aside. "You're sweet, Miss Vance." I stepped inside and froze. The room... No, rooms spread before me in a panorama of luxury I'd only seen in movies. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city spread below, a tapestry of lights against the night sky. The furnishings were cream and gold and soft blue, elegant without being ostentatious. "The bathroom is through here," Mira continued, moving across the plush carpet to another doorway. "Mr. Thorne had it specially designed for you." The bathroom was larger than my parents' entire bedroom. A sunken tub that could fit 4 people dominated one corner, while a shower enclosure with multiple jets occupied another. The countertops were marble, the fixtures gold. "Especially designed," I echoed, running my fingers along the edge of the tub. "But he only bought me tonight." Mira's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Thorne has been aware of you for some time, Miss Vance." The implication sent a chill down my spine. How long had he been watching me? How much did he know? "I'll leave you to bathe," Mira said. "The closet is fully stocked with clothing in your size. The blue dress on the end would be appropriate for dinner." She paused at the door. "If you need anything, simply press the intercom button by the bed." When she was gone, I sank onto the edge of the tub, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. The events of the day crashed over me like a wave. The auction, the sale, the $10 billion, this palace in the sky. And beneath it all, the unsettling knowledge that Dorian Thorne had known about me, had planned for me long before tonight. I turned on the tub faucet, watching as steaming water began to fill the basin. When was the last time I'd had a proper bath? Our apartment's hot water was unreliable at best, and baths were a luxury we couldn't afford. I found bath salts in a crystal jar, tipping a generous amount into the water. The scent of lavender, and something deeper, more exotic, rose with the steam. Slipping out of the auction dress was like shedding a second skin. I let it fall to the floor, a puddle of cheap satin I never wanted to see again. The warm water embraced me as I sank into the tub, and I couldn't hold back a moan of pleasure. For long minutes I simply soaked, letting the heat seep into my bones, washing away the grime of my old life. Eventually I reached for the array of products lined up on the tub's edge. Shampoo that smelled of jasmine, conditioner that made my hair feel like silk, body wash that left my skin softer than it had ever been. By the time I stepped out, wrapped in a towel large enough to be a blanket, I felt like a different person. The closet was a room unto itself, filled with clothing in every color and style. True to Mira's word, a blue dress hung at the end of the rack, a simple sheath of midnight silk that slipped over my head like water. It fit perfectly, as if made for me. Perhaps it had been. I found makeup on the vanity, high-end brands I'd only seen in magazines. My hands shook as I applied a touch of mascara, a hint of blush. The face that looked back at me from the mirror was both familiar and strange. Still me, but polished, refined, worthy of a $10 billion price tag. A soft chime sounded, and Mira's voice came through a hidden speaker. "Miss Vance, Mr. Thorne is waiting in the dining room." I took a deep breath, smoothed down the dress, and stepped back into the hallway. Mira was waiting to escort me, her eyes widening slightly at my transformation. "You look lovely," she said, the first personal comment she'd made. The dining room was on Dorian's floor, accessible by a spiral staircase that curved up from my level. The table was set for two, candles flickering in silver holders, fine china gleaming in the soft light. Dorian stood as I entered, and for a moment I saw something like appreciation in his gaze. He'd changed as well, from the business suit into something more casual, though his version of casual still looked expensive. A black shirt open at the throat, tailored trousers, leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. "Elara," he said, my name again a caress in his mouth. "You look transformed." "Amazing what soap and clean clothes can do," I replied, aiming for lightness but hearing the tremor in my voice. He pulled out my chair, and I sat, hyper-aware of his proximity, the brush of his fingers against my shoulder as he pushed the chair in. A server appeared. I hadn't even realized there were other staff, pouring wine into crystal glasses. "To new beginnings," Dorian said, raising his glass. I mirrored the gesture, the wine catching the candlelight like liquid ruby. "To answers," I countered, taking a sip. The wine was rich and complex, nothing like the cheap boxed stuff Stan and Brenda drank. Dorian smiled, a predator's smile, all teeth and promise. "Very well. Ask your questions." The first course arrived, something delicate involving scallops and foam, but I barely tasted it, too focused on formulating my thoughts. "What does my blood type have to do with vampires?" I finally asked, setting down my fork. Dorian's eyebrows rose slightly. "Direct. I appreciate that." He took another sip of wine, considering vampires, as you call us, are not the undead creatures of myth. We're a genetic variant of humanity, longer lived, stronger, with certain dietary requirements. "Blood," I said flatly. "Yes, blood. But not just any blood. We can consume regular food and drink, as you see." He gestured to his plate. "Blood is a supplement we require, like a vitamin. Most vampires need it monthly. The older and more powerful among us need it more frequently. And my blood, golden blood, what makes it special?" The second course arrived, some kind of pasta with truffles, and Dorian waited until the server had retreated before continuing. "Ratnal blood is compatible with every human on Earth. For vampires, it's more than that. It's amplifying, healing. A single drop of your blood can sustain a vampire for weeks instead of days. It enhances our abilities, sharpens our senses." His voice dropped lower. "It's intoxicating, Elara. Addictive." I pushed my pasta around the plate, appetite vanishing. "So I'm, what? Your personal blood bag?" Anger flashed in his eyes, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "You are not a blood bag. You are the rarest of treasures. Do you think I would pay $10 billion for a mere donor? Then what am I?" The question came out smaller than I intended, vulnerable in a way I hated. Dorian set down his fork, reaching across the table to take my hand. His skin was cool but not cold, his grip gentle but inescapable. "You are the key to the future of my kind," he said, each word precise and weighted. "For centuries, vampires have been dwindling. Fewer are born each generation. Those who remain grow weaker, more susceptible to disease, to sunlight. We are dying out, Elara, and my blood can stop that. Your blood can reverse it. Early tests on samples we acquired show that Ratnal blood can strengthen vampire DNA, repair the degradation that has occurred over generations." I pulled my hand away, a chill running through me. "Samples you acquired. You've been taking my blood without my knowledge." He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Not directly. Your parents sold samples to various medical facilities over the years. We simply intercepted some of them. My parents, of course. They dragged me to so many special doctor appointments over the years, always coming home with cash afterward. I'd assumed they were selling my plasma legally. Apparently not. So what happens now? I asked, pushing away my barely touched plate. You lock me in a gilded cage and drain me whenever you need a fix. Dorian's laugh was unexpected, a rich sound that seemed to fill the room. Dramatic, but no. You are not a prisoner, Elara. You are my guest. My very valuable, very protected guest. Protected from what? His expression darkened. There are others of my kind who would not be as considerate of your comfort, who would see you as nothing more than the blood in your veins. And there are humans who would exploit you just as your parents did, but on a much larger scale. The third course arrived, some kind of meat, perfectly cooked, but I couldn't focus on it. My mind was racing, trying to process everything Dorian had told me. And what do you get out of this arrangement, besides my blood? I asked, cutting into the meat without really seeing it. Dorian watched me, his gaze intense. Your cooperation, your willingness, freely given blood, is more potent than blood taken by force or coercion, and perhaps, in time, your partnership in other ways. The implication hung in the air between us, electric and unspoken. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, and focused on my plate. I haven't agreed to anything yet, I reminded him. No, he conceded. But you will, because the alternative is returning to your parents, to that life of poverty and abuse. And we both know you won't choose that. He was right, and I hated him a little for it. The thought of going back to Stan and Brenda, to their filthy apartment and endless schemes, made my stomach turn. Even if Dorian was using me for my blood, at least here I had clean clothes, hot water, and food that didn't come from a gas station. How often? I asked, meeting his eyes. How often would you need my blood? A small amount once a week, no more than a standard blood donation. You would be monitored by medical professionals, given supplements to ensure your health is never compromised. It didn't sound unreasonable put that way. A small price to pay for this new life of luxury. And I'm free to leave, to go out, to have my own life. With reasonable security precautions. Yes, I have no desire to keep you locked away, Elara. That would be counterproductive to your well-being, and thus to the quality of your blood. Always back to the blood. I pushed my plate away, no longer hungry. I need time to think, I said. Dorian nodded, unsurprised. Of course. Take all the time you need. He stood, offering his hand to help me from my chair. In the meantime, consider this your home. Explore. Rest. Adjust. I took his hand, allowing him to lead me back to the staircase. At the top, he paused, still holding my fingers in his. One more thing, Elara. Whatever you decide, know that your parents will never touch you again. I've made sure of it. There was something in his tone, a cold finality, that made me wonder exactly what he meant, but I was too exhausted to ask. The emotional whiplash of the day had left me drained. Good night, Dorian, I said, gently extracting my hand. Good night, Elara. Sweet dreams. I returned to my suite, closing the door behind me with a soft click. The bed called to me, a cloud of white linens and plush pillows. I slipped out of the blue dress, hanging it carefully in the closet, and found a silk nightgown that felt like wearing moonlight. As I slid between sheets finer than anything I'd ever touched, I thought about Dorian's offer. Blood for luxury, blood for safety, blood for a new life. Was it really such a bad deal? I drifted off to sleep, wondering what my blood tasted like to a vampire, and whether Dorian Thorne had been dreaming of that taste for longer than I knew. Morning came with sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close. For a moment, I was disoriented, the luxurious surroundings foreign after a lifetime of waking to peeling wallpaper and the sounds of arguments. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my confusion. "Miss Vance, breakfast is ready whenever you are," Mira called. "Thank you," I replied, my voice still rough with sleep. "I'll be out shortly." I found clothes laid out for me, casual but expensive looking, jeans that fit perfectly, and a cashmere sweater softer than a whisper. In the bathroom, I discovered a toothbrush still in its packaging, high-end toiletries, a hairbrush with natural bristles. When I emerged, Mira was waiting to escort me to a sunny breakfast nook overlooking the city. The table was set with fresh fruit, pastries, eggs and coffee that smelled like heaven. "Mr. Thorne had to leave for a meeting," Mira explained as I sat. "He asked me to give you this." She handed me a slim phone, sleek and obviously expensive. "It's programmed with his number and mine. There's also a security app that will alert our team to your location if you need assistance." I turned the phone over in my hands. "Am I allowed to leave the penthouse?" "Of course, Miss Vance. You're not a prisoner. Mr. Thorne simply asks that you take security with you if you go out." She gestured to the window, where I could see the city spread below, people like ants from this height. "It's as much for your protection as anything else." After breakfast, I explored my new domain. My floor of the penthouse included not just the bedroom suite, but a private library, a small gym, a media room with a screen that covered an entire wall, and a kitchen stocked with everything I could imagine wanting. I spent hours just touching things, the spines of leather-bound books, the cool marble countertops, the plush carpet beneath my bare feet. Everything spoke of wealth beyond my comprehension, of a world I'd only glimpsed through shop windows and magazine pages. In the afternoon, I ventured up to Dorian's floor, curious about the man who had purchased me. His space was different from mine, darker, more masculine, with rich woods and deep colors. His library was 3 times the size of mine, the books older, many in languages I couldn't identify. I was examining a glass case containing what looked like ancient scrolls when I heard the elevator doors open. I turned, expecting Dorian, but instead saw Mira hurrying toward me, her usual composure fractured. "Miss Vance, I've been looking for you. Mr. Thorne called. He's on his way up and asks that you join him in the main living room." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "Is something wrong?" Mira hesitated, then nodded slightly. "There's been a situation with your parents." "My parents?" The words dropped like stones in my gut. Whatever peace I'd found in exploring my new surroundings evaporated instantly. Dorian arrived minutes later, his face a mask of controlled anger. He wore a different suit than the night before, this one charcoal grey with a blood-red tie. The Vampire King was back. The casual man from dinner nowhere to be seen. "Elara," he said, crossing to where I stood by the windows. "I apologize for the interruption to your day." Mira said, "There's a situation with my parents," I replied, searching his face for clues. "What happened?" Dorian's jaw tightened. "It seems they've discovered the true amount of the transaction." I frowned, confused. "But you told them last night, 10% now, the rest in installments." "Yes, but they believed the total was much lower." The auctioneer was discreet about the final amount. He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture of frustration. "Someone leaked the information. The full 10 billion. The implications hit me immediately. Stan and Brenda with knowledge of that kind of money. Money they believed was rightfully theirs would be dangerous. Desperate. "Where are they now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dorian's expression darkened further. "Outside. They've been trying to get into the building for the past hour, making quite a scene. Security has kept them at bay, but they're threatening to go to the media with stories about vampires and blood slaves if they're not given their share of the money." My legs suddenly felt weak, and I sank onto a nearby sofa. "They'll ruin everything." "They'll try," Dorian corrected, sitting beside me, close enough that I could feel the cool radiating from his skin. "But I've dealt with worse threats than a pair of drug-addicted opportunists." The casual dismissal in his tone should have reassured me, but instead it sent a chill down my spine. I remembered his words from the night before, "Your parents will never touch you again. I've made sure of it." "What are you going to do?" I asked. Not entirely sure I wanted to know the answer. Dorian took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. The gesture was oddly intimate, at odds with the tension in the room. "That depends on you, Elara. Have you made your decision about our arrangement?" I stared at him, incredulous. "You're asking me that now? With my parents outside threatening to expose you?" "Precisely because of that," he replied, his voice soft but intense. "If you choose to stay, to accept my offer, then I will deal with your parents as threats to both of us. If you choose to leave, to return to them, then the matter resolves itself differently." It wasn't really a choice, and we both knew it. Return to Stan and Brenda, to their abuse and neglect, their schemes and desperation, or stay here, in this palace in the sky, with its luxuries and safety, at the cost of a pint of blood a week. "I'll stay," I said, the words feeling like a door closing behind me, sealing me into a new life. "I accept your offer." Something flickered in Dorian's eyes, satisfaction, relief, perhaps even genuine pleasure. He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent electricity shooting up my arm. "A wise choice," he murmured against my skin. "Now let me show you exactly what your parents are demanding." He led me to his office, a space dominated by a massive desk and wall-to-wall screens. With a few taps on a keyboard, one of the screens came to life, showing the street below. There, pacing in front of the building's entrance, were Stan and Brenda. Even from this distance, I could see that Stan was agitated, gesticulating wildly as he argued with the security guards. Brenda hung back, smoking nervously, her thin frame swallowed by a coat that had seen better days. Dorian tapped another key, and sound filled the room. "Billions of dollars, do you understand?" "Billions," Stan was shouting. "That bloodsucker stole my daughter and my money. I want what's mine." "Sir, as I've explained, this is private property. If you don't leave, we'll be forced to call the police." The security guard replied, his voice calm but firm. "Call them. I'll tell them everything. About the vampires, about the blood trade, about how Thorne kidnapped my little girl." I flinched at the lie. Stan had never called me his little girl, except when trying to manipulate someone. The fake concern in his voice made my stomach turn. "They look different than they did last night," I observed, trying to focus on details rather than the nausea rising in my throat. Dorian nodded. "They've been shopping, with the $1 million they received as the first installment." I looked closer and realized he was right. Stan's usual stained t-shirt had been replaced with a leather jacket that still had the tags hanging from the sleeve. Brenda's coat was new too, and her hair had been dyed a brassy blonde. "They think they're going to get the rest of it," I said, understanding dawning. "They think if they make enough noise, you'll pay them off just to shut them up." "A reasonable assumption for people who understand nothing about me," Dorian replied, his tone glacial. What they fail to realize is that I don't respond well to threats. On the screen, Stan's tirade continued, growing more outlandish by the moment. He's got her locked up there, draining her blood. She's just a kid, for Christ's sake. I was 23, hardly a kid, but Stan had never been one to let facts get in the way of a good story. I want to talk to them, I said suddenly, surprising myself as much as Dorian. He turned to me, one eyebrow raised. Are you certain that's wise? No, it probably wasn't. But some part of me needed closure, needed to face the people who had seen me as nothing more than a commodity my entire life. Yes, I said, more firmly than I felt. I want them to see that I'm here by choice, that I know exactly what they did. Dorian studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, we'll go down together. The elevator ride to the lobby felt like descending into my past. With each floor we passed, I felt the weight of my history pressing down on me, every bruise Stan had left, every time Brenda had chosen drugs over food, every night I'd gone to bed hungry and afraid. Dorian must have sensed my tension, because he took my hand, his cool fingers twining with mine. Remember, you're not alone anymore, he said quietly. You're under my protection now. The elevator doors opened directly into the lobby, a soaring space of marble and glass. The security team noticed us immediately, straightening to attention as Dorian approached. Mr. Thorne, the lead guard said, we were just about to call the police. That won't be necessary, Dorian replied. Miss Vance would like to speak with these individuals. Through the glass doors I could see Stan still ranting, his face red with exertion and probably drugs. Brenda had moved to sit on a planter, her new coat pooling around her like spilled oil. Let them in, I said, squeezing Dorian's hand once before letting go. I needed to stand on my own for this. The guard looked to Dorian, who nodded. A moment later the doors slid open and Stan's voice filled the lobby. Going to sue you for every penny. You blood-sucking. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me, his eyes widening. Elara, baby girl, thank God you're alive. The performance was so transparent, it would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. He rushed toward me, arms outstretched as if for a hug, but security intercepted him, holding him back. That's my daughter, he protested, struggling against their grip. Let me go. Brenda had followed more slowly, her eyes darting around the opulent lobby, calculating the value of everything she saw. When her gaze landed on me, there was no maternal concern, only a greedy assessment of my new clothes, my clean hair, the obvious signs of wealth that now surrounded me. You look good, honey, she said, her voice raspy from decades of smoking. Real good. They treating you okay up there? Better than you ever did, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. What do you want, Brenda? Her eyes narrowed at my directness. Usually, I was meek around them, conditioned by years of punishment for any hint of defiance. We want what's ours, Stan interjected, still held firmly by security. $10 billion, Elara. Do you have any idea how much money that is? And this monster only gave us $1 million. $1 million more than you deserve, I said, taking a step toward him. You sold me, Stan, like an animal, like a thing. You have no claim to me or any money associated with me anymore. Stan's face contorted with rage, the mask of concerned father slipping. You ungrateful little bitch. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. You neglected me, abused me, used me as a cash cow whenever you needed a fix. I was shaking now, years of unspoken accusations finally finding voice. You never saw me as a daughter. I was just a resource to be exploited. $10 billion, Stan roared, spittle flying from his lips. That's our money. We made you. Your blood is our blood. I felt Dorian move beside me, a subtle shift that nonetheless radiated menace. "Mr. Vance," he said. His voice was a silken blade. "Your blood is indeed your blood, but your daughter, she was never yours." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Dorian reached into his pocket and pulled out something small that caught the light. A coin. A simple copper penny. "This," he said, holding it between two elegant fingers, "is what you sold your daughter for. 1 cent. Not even the full dime you agreed upon with Vico. 9 cents short of the pittance you thought she was worth." The blood drained from Stan's face. That's not true. We got 5,000. Vico lied to you." Dorian cut him off. "He paid you a penny and pocketed the rest. I have the receipt, signed in your hand." He held up a wrinkled piece of paper for the transfer of ownership of one Elara Vance, aged 16, in exchange for monetary compensation of 1 cent USD. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. No, that can't be right. We wouldn't." "But you did," I whispered, the truth of it burning through me like acid. "You sold me for less than you'd sell a used shoe." The security guards tightened their grip on my parents as they began to struggle. The gathered crowd at the gala had fallen silent, hundreds of eyes watching the drama unfold. I felt their gazes like physical touches, some pitying, others curious, a few hungry in ways that made my skin crawl. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dorian addressed the room, his voice carrying effortlessly across the marble floor. "Allow me to introduce Stan and Brenda Vance. They are what we in the old world would call blood merchants. They traded their only child for what they thought was drug money." A murmur of disgust rippled through the crowd. These were vampires, creatures who fed on human blood, yet even they seemed appalled by my parents' actions. "The girl they sold," Dorian continued, his hand finding the small of my back, "possesses the rarest blood type on Earth. Worth billions to our medical research. Worth everything to me." His eyes found mine, and in them I saw a possessiveness that should have frightened me, but instead made me feel strangely protected. Stan began to thrash against his captors. "You can't do this. She's still our daughter. We have rights." "Rights?" Dorian's laugh was cold enough to freeze the air. "You forfeited those when you signed this." He waved the receipt again. "But I am nothing if not fair. You came for your share, did you not? You believe you deserve a portion of what your daughter is worth?" My stomach twisted. Was Dorian actually going to give them money? "Bring them forward," he commanded. The guards dragged my parents to the center of the room, forcing them to their knees before us. Dorian gestured, and a servant appeared with a small velvet cushion. On it rested a single penny, shined to a copper gleam. "Your payment in full," Dorian said. 1 cent. The price you set for your daughter's life." The room erupted in laughter, cold, cruel vampire laughter that bounced off the high ceiling and echoed through my bones. My parents knelt before the assembled elite, humiliation coloring their faces a deep crimson. "Take it," Dorian said, his voice hard as diamond. "Take what you're owed." Stan reached for the coin with trembling fingers, but Dorian wasn't finished. "But first, perhaps we should discuss interest. It's been 4 years since our transaction. At standard compound interest, I believe you now owe Miss Vance. Let's see." He pretended to calculate. "Your lives." The laughter stopped abruptly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You sold her for a penny," Dorian continued, "but I paid Vico 1 million for her contract. The difference represents my valuation of her worth over yours. 1 million to 1. Those are the odds you face tonight." I watched as understanding dawned on my parents' faces, quickly followed by terror. "Please," Brenda whispered, mascara tracking down her cheeks. "We made a mistake. We were desperate." "So was she," Dorian replied. "A child in your care, and you threw her to wolves." He turned to me then, his eyes softening just for me. "Elara, this is your moment. What would you have me do with them?" The room held its breath. I felt the weight of 100 immortal gazes. These were beings who had lived through centuries of human cruelty, who had seen empires rise and fall, who understood vengeance as an art form. I stepped forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The penny gleamed on its velvet cushion, a mocking reminder of my value in my parents' eyes. I picked it up, feeling its negligible weight in my palm. 4 years of pain, of being harvested for my blood, of wondering why I hadn't been enough for them to love, all distilled into this worthless coin. "You wanted what was yours," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I flicked the penny at Stan. It hit his forehead with a small ping before falling to the marble floor, where it spun in diminishing circles before lying flat. "That's all you get," I continued. "Not a cent more." Stan lunged forward suddenly, breaking free of the guard's grip. "You ungrateful little—" He never finished. Dorian moved with inhuman speed, catching my father by the throat and lifting him off the ground with one hand. "I should drain you dry," Dorian snarled, his fangs fully extended now. "I should let every vampire in this room take a taste of the worthless blood that spawned something so precious." "Dorian," I said softly, "not like this." He looked at me, surprise evident in his ancient eyes. "Not because they don't deserve it," I clarified, "but because I don't want their blood on my hands. I don't want to start my new life with their ending." Slowly, Dorian lowered Stan to the ground. My father collapsed, gasping and clutching his throat. "Very well," Dorian said, "but they cannot go unpunished." He snapped his fingers, and 2 more guards appeared. "Take them to the pit. 1 year for each cent they valued their daughter at." Brenda screamed as the guards seized them again. "What's the pit?" "Elara, please. Don't let them take us." I turned away, unable to watch. I'd heard whispers of the pit, a place where vampires kept those who had wronged them, not to kill them, but to use them. Blood farms, some called them. A year of controlled bleeding wouldn't kill them, but it would be a fitting punishment. "One more thing," I said, turning back. The guards paused. I walked up to my mother, whose mascara-streaked face had aged a decade in minutes. "I forgive you," I whispered. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Her eyes widened in shock, but before she could respond, the guards dragged them away. Their screams faded as they were taken from the ballroom, leaving behind only the penny on the floor and a room full of vampires whose respect I could feel like a physical force. Dorian approached me, taking my hands in his. "You showed mercy," he said, "more than they deserved." "Is that weakness?" I asked. "No," he replied. "It's strength of the highest order. To have power and choose restraint, that is the mark of a queen." The word hung between us. Queen, not just a blood donor, not just a human pet. A queen. "Is that what I am to you?" I asked, suddenly aware that the entire room was watching us, hanging on every word. "It's what you could be," he said. "If you choose it." Understanding dawned. "You're asking me to join me, fully, eternally." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "Your blood is precious, Elara, but it's not why I want you by my side. I've lived 1,000 years, and in all that time, I've never met anyone with your courage, your compassion, your capacity for forgiveness in the face of unforgivable wrongs. My heart raced. Becoming like him meant leaving my humanity behind. It meant choosing a different kind of life, one that would stretch beyond normal human years, beyond normal human experiences. You don't have to decide now, he added, seeing my hesitation. Take all the time you need. A year, a decade. I can wait. The room seemed to spin around me. The faces of the vampire elite blurred into a sea of pale expectation. Only Dorian remained in focus, his eyes holding mine, patient and eternal. I don't need time, I heard myself say. I've had 4 years of being used for my blood. If becoming like you means I control who takes it and when, then I choose that power. A smile spread across Dorian's face, not the cold, calculated one he showed the world, but something genuine and warm. He lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a kiss against my knuckles. Tonight then, he said, after the gala, we'll complete the transformation under the full moon. The crowd erupted in applause, not the mocking laughter from before, but genuine celebration. Glasses of crimson liquid were raised in toasts. Music swelled from the orchestra. The gala resumed as if the ugly confrontation with my parents had been merely an entertaining interlude. Dorian led me to the dance floor, and as we moved together in perfect synchrony, I caught glimpses of my reflection in the mirrored walls. I barely recognized myself. The confident posture, the elegant gown, the light in my eyes that had been extinguished for so long. Look at yourself, Dorian murmured, following my gaze. See what I see. For the first time in years I really looked at my reflection, not the frightened girl who avoided mirrors because they showed too much truth, not the pale, sickly thing that Vico had kept locked away, but a woman on the cusp of transformation, both terrified and exhilarated by the choice she had made. Hours later, as the last guests departed and the grand ballroom emptied, Dorian led me to his private chambers. The full moon poured silver light through floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the room in an ethereal glow. "Are you certain?" he asked one final time, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "I am," I replied. "I choose this. I choose you." He nodded, then guided me to a chaise lounge positioned directly in the moonlight. "The transformation isn't painless," he warned, "but I'll be with you through every moment." I lay back, my heart pounding against my ribs. Dorian knelt beside me, his face solemn now. "Your golden blood has sustained me," he said softly. "Now my blood will transform you." He bit his own wrist, dark blood welling from the wound. "Drink," he commanded, pressing his wrist to my lips. The taste was metallic, ancient, powerful. It burned going down, like swallowing stars. Heat spread through my body, followed by cold so intense I thought I might shatter. Dorian watched me intently, his hand cradling my head. When he determined I'd taken enough, he withdrew his wrist. The wound closed instantly. "Now," he said, "we complete the circle." His fangs extended fully as he lowered his mouth to my neck. The bite was sharp but brief. I felt him draw my blood, my precious golden blood, one final time as a human. The sensation was different from the clinical extractions I'd endured for years. This was intimate, almost reverent. As my consciousness began to fade, I heard him whisper against my skin, "Die as a victim, awaken as a queen." Darkness claimed me then, a velvet oblivion that seemed to last both seconds and centuries. I felt my heart slow, stutter, and finally stop. The silence of my own body was deafening. Then, pain. Extraordinary pain as every cell in my body died and was reborn. I arched off the chaise. A silent scream locked in my throat. Dorian held me through it all, murmuring encouragement, promises, ancient words in languages I didn't recognize. When I opened my eyes again, the world had changed. Colors I had no names for. Sounds so distant they should have been impossible to hear. The texture of the air itself against my new skin. And hunger. A hunger unlike anything I'd ever known. Dorian helped me sit up, his smile proud and tender. "Welcome to your new life, my queen." He offered his wrist again, this time to ease my first thirst. As I drank, memories flowed with his blood, centuries of life, of love, of loss, of power. I saw who he truly was, beyond the CEO facade, beyond even the vampire king. I saw the man who had waited a millennium to find someone worthy of ruling beside him. When I'd taken enough, I pulled away, licking the last drops from my lips. My new fangs felt strange but right, like they had always been waiting to descend. Dorian led me to a full-length mirror across the room. "Look," he said simply. The woman who stared back at me was both familiar and foreign. My eyes glowed with an inner light. My skin had a luminescence that caught the moonlight. I was still me, but more, as if all my potential had suddenly been realized. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice ringing with new resonance. "Whatever you wish," Dorian replied, standing behind me, his reflection joining mine. "We have eternity." I turned to face him, this man who had bought me for $1 million and valued me beyond price, who had seen worth in me when my own parents had seen only profit. "I want to help others," I said. "Others like me. Humans who are used, discarded, sold." He nodded, unsurprised. "A worthy cause for a queen. Your golden blood may be unique, but your story is not. There are many who need the kind of justice you received tonight." "Justice and mercy," I corrected. Both, he agreed, taking my hand and raising it to his lips. "We begin tomorrow night. For now, the dawn approaches, and you must rest through your first day." As he led me to the massive bed with its blackout curtains, I caught one last glimpse of myself in the mirror. No longer a victim, no longer merchandise, no longer defined by the copper penny that had been my price. Queen Elara, the name settled over me like a mantle as the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. I closed my eyes, not in fear or resignation as I had so many times before, but in peaceful anticipation of the night to come, and all the nights after that stretched into eternity. The penny my father had dropped still lay on the ballroom floor, forgotten by everyone. Just a worthless coin now, stripped of its power to define my worth. In time it would tarnish and fade, while I would only grow stronger with each passing year.